Okay. I have a few anecdotes I'd like to share with you for this 175th video, 175th anniversary video. They're about the early days. We joined the Advent in 1977, and after a few Sundays, I really was interested in the bell tower and whether or not Conrad could show me the works and I could play the bells occasionally. So I went up in the bell tower with him, and he showed me how he played, and of course it was beautiful. And he played them all the time. And then he said, now, you have to understand that you can't play all the hymns as they're written, but you can transpose them for the bells that we have. And I said, that lets me out. And so that was the end of my bell playing. And then later on, a member of the choir actually did transpose as many hymns as possible to be played with our bells. And so now we can just play by the notes that she recorded. So it gives me great honor and pleasure to be able to play the bells on Sunday. Conrad brought me back in here and gave me a tour of the church when we first joined, gave us a tour. And one of the things he pointed out, he was a very precise person, and he pointed up to the arch over the altar. And he said, this really bothers me every time I look at it. And he pointed out the asymmetry between the windows and the arch over the windows. And I cannot keep my eyes off that asymmetry every time I come in here. And also the asymmetry in the back of the church over the organ, where the arches are not centered over the center of the organ. So Conrad was a very precise person. Speaking of the organ, I had one other little story I'd like to share, and that is the search for the new organ. We had a Moeller theater-style electro-pneumatic organ, and it was up here in the chancel. The choir was on the north side, and the keyboard on the south side. And with an electro-pneumatic organ, the keyboard can be anywhere. But in the late 70s, early 80s, when we were asked to look for a new organ to replace that one. It was, at that point, over 50 years old. It had been repaired many times. The leathers in the bellows had to be changed, and now they were cracked again, and air was leaking, and so they needed to be replaced, and that was pretty expensive. So the vestry wanted to look at the possibility of buying a new organ for the church. So we put together a committee. Walter Bryce was senior warden. He put together the committee, and the committee included, besides me, Sissy Stone and Kesey Maddox, Roy Powell, and Clark Blackman, and there may be one or two others, but the ladies were really the most loyal ones of going on all of the trips. And we went throughout the Southeast. We looked at probably a dozen different organs on Sunday mornings and heard them played and so forth. And finally narrowed it down. Oh, Margaret Hopper, I left her out. She was the organist and choir master, so she was always on every trip. And so we finally selected a Holtkamp and were about ready to place an order when I got a call from John Bullard, who was a Wofford professor of religion and an excellent organist and the organist over at Bethel Methodist. And he said, you know, I hear that you're looking at organs, and before you make a decision, I really think you ought to check out the Flintrop. And there are three of them within a small distance of one another up in the Salem, North Carolina area. So we went up, and it was the weekend before Easter. And we were up there, and we heard the Flintrops up there, and we were really impressed. And beautiful workmanship, beautiful sound. They're a Dutch organ maker, and we actually changed our decision. We came back and talked it over and voted to recommend a Flintrop to the vestry. So we came in to the nave here to have a church meeting, to give our findings, and to make recommendations. Incidentally, we had a church acoustics engineer come down to advise us, and he advised very strongly that we move the organ to the rear in at that time, the balcony, and make it a choir loft, and to take out all carpeting. And so that was our recommendation: take all the carpeting out. The chancel and altar area were all carpeted, as well as the aisles. And so we presented all these findings, and at that time there were members who opposed and members who supported, and they all spoke up. And I remember one in particular, Mrs. Florence Twitty, was adamant. She got up and she said, "We cannot replace that beautiful Moeller organ, and besides, it has such a wonderful soft sound. If you put that new organ in here and start it up, it will blow every window out in the church." But fortunately, she didn't carry the crowd with her, although some members were so opposed that they had nothing more to do. In fact, I don't know that they ever came back, but that was very few. Florence certainly came back. She was a big supporter of the church. And it was approved, and at that time, the organ was ordered, and I think it was delivered and put in and voiced and ready to go in a few years. And we've enjoyed it ever since.